I have received a question here, and I will start with the petroleum sector. And I would humbly request Honorable Boy, you pick a pen and paper. So the question here, the first one, you've really spoken well about your intent on local content. You actually started that. I was part of that process, but and yes, we have to congratulate you for that. You initiated the process. You walked through the upstream one and the downstream one. You started, but you never completed. And the question here really goes into that particular one. The all boy birth, the ABB, the CBM, the all boy birth in Tema. It serves as Ghana's main mooring or berthing facility for the Eastern Zone, which also serves as the primary gateway for product imports. Ghana imports over 75% of its product needs through this facility. This was constructed in 2006 under a build, operate and transfer arrangement by Trafigura for the government of Ghana. The BDCs, who account for the largest use of the facility and funded the payment of the facility through its utilization, proposed in 2014 to purchase the facility upon the expiry of the BOT arrangement in 2016, either wholly or in partnership with government, and also develop an alternate facility to feed the country in case of any major crisis with this facility. Your government in 2016 totally overlooked the proposals of the Ghanaian private sector players and even failed to even hold discussions over this proposal. You opted to grant a concession to a foreign company through toll, and in addition, you actually dashed any hope of the Ghanaian BDCs from developing an alternate facility by forcing a monopoly without the approval of the MPA or the anti-monopoly provisions in the MPA Act. By granting exclusivity to the concessionaires for 15 good years, Ghana today faces a major single point risk under this situation. If that CBM goes down for any reason, whether it's terrorist attack or you actually have a major technical defect, this country will be on its knees. Question, two questions under this. One, how do you reconcile this action of yours with claims of your commitment to local content and the growth of the Ghanaian sector? Practically, you turned your back on your own people and people who actually funded that entire project, because it's the BDC throughput that pays for it. Number two, will you revise your policy stance on this matter and vary this exclusivity and allow the development of an alternate facility by the private sector, possibly in conjunction with government, to avert the monopoly and ensure product supply security? That is your first question from the BDC subsector. There are actually three questions that have been tabled. I don't know if you would rather take. Well, I think we'll take it all, and then you respond to that. Then we also move to ASAP next. So the second question. The second question. The first one is question A, section A. We are going to section B. In 2015, you commenced an aggressive government domination policy action aimed at having Tor, Boss and Goil to strategically align and dominate the downstream sector. This led to Boss, the infrastructure company, actively trading and becoming Ghana's largest importer in 2016, while Go Energy, the BDC and trading subsidiary of Goil, became one of the least importers, despite being the largest BDCs and oil marketing companies in the country at the time. This model led to Goil selling at about the lowest prices at the pump. In simple terms, Boss was selling at prices lower than market and cost to Goil to render the private sector uncompetitive. The invoices are there to bear witness. This market interference by government inspired a spike in illicit trading by petroleum service providers to enable the private OMCs compete. This move to survive then turned into the norm and has since led to a loss of 2.4 billion in taxes between 2016 and 2018. And 2019 is expected to be worse or as bad. Reports suggest the culpability of state security institutions and politicians, as well as petroleum service providers across the divide. Dangerously, we are building a huge underground economy with the ability to ensure state capture by miscreants as these funds continue to flow into political party financing across board. The boss MD at the time boasted of boss making profits. It had actually turned boss around, was the argument at the time. In 2017, after the review of the boss books by the new government, it was revealed that boss rather posted an all-time record trading loss of 624 million Ghana cedis. This loss is being carried by the taxpayers and is still being funded significantly by the output of private OMCs and private BDCs, who are the vehicle for generating your ESLA, and that is now being used to fund this particular thing. The questions here: what is your government policy stance on BOS and its focus? How can how can the private sector be assured that your government will be committed to establishing a fair market space where all are allowed to effectively compete for the growth of the sector and the delivery of sustainable value to customers? C. Will you be promoters of government-owned entities or promoters of the entire ecosystem of players? And finally, under that, how do you intend to reverse this illicit trade situation that is bedeviling us as an entire economy? Bear in mind, the downstream sector accounts for about 13-14% of total domestic tax income.
I think that the first thing has to do with the CBM and the decision to make sure that at the time that TOR is basically the facilitator, I think it was done at the time for very good reason. The intention was a good one at the time, but it's very, very clear to me that this is a decision that has to be taken a second look at, and to make sure that we address the concerns that you've raised. The singular focus of the incoming NDC government, God willing, is to basically strengthen and propel the private sector. And to that extent, our focus is to re-engage, look at that situation. I remember the option on the table is, for example, the BDC is coming together to build an alternative CBM. Those are options that we are very anxious, ready to engage the private sector, so that we can strengthen the private sector going forward. I think that the other important question that has been asked has to do with the issue of bust trading. And clearly, again, I point to decisions that were made and the circumstances at the time. And I won't take you back, but you remember that we were dealing with a gun on our head from the BDCs. And we had a responsibility as a government to make sure that if BDCs decide to basically bring the countries on its knees at a time, would that be an alternative to make sure we have petroleum products and businesses, hospitals and life going on? That probably led us to that decision. I think it is time for us to review that decision, to make sure we take decisions that will propel and strengthen the private sector. Let me make clear what the policy of the NDC government when it comes to BOST is. BOST must be an institution whose singular focus is to have its infrastructure strengthening and supporting the private sector and not competing with them. And that is what we will do. I think that those are very serious concerns. And I've said that, believe me, these are things that we are going to really take a holistic view of. We have to. This is the NDC government that engage the private sector, that engage you. And I'm very happy it is your report that is telling us, telling the people of Ghana that we've saved $3 billion because of a policy decision of price liberalization. We are ready to engage and make sure that every step that we can take to ensure these leakages and this illegal trade are stopped is something we will do. Let me tell you some of the things we did. As energy minister, I recall that on an annual basis we were paying 40 million Ghana cedis on what they call kerosene subsidy. And guess what? The kerosene was never getting to the villages. Took a stroke of a pen and said enough of it. You know, villagers, they want light, we'll give them solar lamps. And that was it. We saved Ghana 40 billion right there. We are ready to engage to make sure that the private sector is strengthened and make sure that any illegal activity that is going to be an impediment to the private sector growth is something that we stop. So we are excited and we are ready to make sure that we strengthen the private sector. That's our singular focus. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll call on ASAP.
Madam Chair, distinguished participant of this important meeting, Honorable Minister, good to see you. I think my attitude towards this year's manifestos, really, and based on experience, is that I want to hear a conversation that says that when I have the mandate, I want to create a platform to engage on the broad strategies that you have for the energy sector. Because situations tend to be fluid when you have power. And most often you become so uncontrollable. And how you want to engage and ensure that decisions are not rushed, we can properly process decisions to ensure that they benefit the people and have a long-term perspective to the decisions that we take. I think that is the commitment I'm looking to hear from the political parties, because that is what we are always lacking. We hear the beautiful print, we see the prints, we hear the stories, but when it comes to implementation, because you are promised and it's on paper, you pick it and start rolling it. Whether the process is faulty or not, you don't care to listen to anybody, and that has been a big problem. It's been good listening to, the past achievement. We've worked on some of the policies and the laws, and we contributed to it. And it was refreshing to hear you say what happened in the past. But we are at a certain stage, and I was hoping to hear that we will pin down the problems of the energy sector today, so that we know how we address them into the future. And I would touch on two important ones. When it comes to the fuel smuggling, the downstream that Senya was talking about, 2 years ago the estimation was that it was costing Ghana about 2 billion cedis a year. And it is not just ordinary people. This is not gold bars that you carry and go away with. These are truckloads of products that are crisscrossing across the country, smuggled offshore into Ghana and sold into the system. So it is a heavily compromised system that is allowing this leakage to fester. And if you check the trend, it's so alarming that all of a sudden our growth, consumption pattern is curving down because people are profiting from it. If you're able to smuggle a truckload of petroleum, you have 100,000 cedis. Cool job. So in a week, if you're able to do 5 trucks, and these are people who are becoming so powerful and difficult to fight. So it's a problem that has to be diagnosed, and then we see how we deal with it to provide the resources that are required for development. So I want to hear how you deal with that. There is another big issue that we haven't really talked about, and I understand why. Not just the NDC, the MPP would also talk about it. The problem we have in the power sector today, really, is the distribution system. That is the bigger issue. I don't want to call it an animal here. So now PDS is gone. There is no other discussion on the table how we fix ECG to ensure that there is no discussion on how we fix ECG, and perhaps nobody wants to touch the workers of ECG at this point. So both parties are playing safe. But we need to have that hard conversation about how do we fix the distribution of electricity to ensure that into the future we can sell power and recover the money to pay the value chain. Because as we speak today, we cannot pay for gas. So, you have to cough about $30 million every month to pay for upstream gas because ECG cannot collect the revenue. And we are afraid to talk about it. So these are hard issues that we need to engage on. But most importantly, how do we commit to engage into the future? Engage with industry, engage with civil society, engage with citizens to ensure that decisions that we are taking actually promote the interest of the people. One thing that came up also here is TOR, and maybe a further probe into how you will deliver a new TOR is also important. Can we have a new conversation about disposing of the asset? Can we be bold to do it? Because government has tried time and again, and it's not working. We keep pumping money, and it's not working. You often get agitations from the workers, and we withdraw. But the reality is that it is not even serving the interest of the workers. Because if you have a semi-functional entity, your salary is not going to go up. It's not performing. So how do we have a conversation about ensuring that we can either introduce private investment into it or dispose of it entirely to ensure that facility doesn't continue to lie waste? I think in the interest of time, I would allow others to come in. Thank you.
You started off by saying that you are looking forward to a government that is prepared to be very open and to create a platform to engage. President John Dramani Mahama, the incoming president, God willing, is ready to engage the private sector. And I'm very proud of the record we've had with engagement with a lot of you. I talk about Act 919, I will never forget ASEP and all the banters, but it turned out well for our country. I am very convinced now that the private sector mean well. Look at the level of collaboration and engagement we've had on critical national issues, on AKE, on AGM, on AJAPA, on PDS. We are in opposition. I think it is very clear, and I remember President Mahama saying that. So why won't we engage you when we are in government? If we engage you on these critical issues of national interest, we have to be very open to engage you, and we are ready to do that. But our record is clear. It is the NDC government, for example, that passed the fuel marking regulations to make sure we stop the evasion of taxes and the smuggling of issues. It is the NDC government that passed the fuel tracking also to make sure that the marking and the tracking to stop adulteration of products. And these are very critical. And there are a lot of other issues that I want my good friend, but you made a very important point about thermal oil refinery. I don't think that the new NDC government is going to shy away from that. And I think in my presentation I said, the NDC government is ready to address in practical terms how we deal with TOR. Because we believe that it is possible to address the three critical issues that has always been a problem with TOR. Government has always been a problem. We need to look ourselves in the mirror and say, what can we do to make sure that TOR is vibrant? We are talking about Petroleum Hub today. We need to fix TOR. We are for Petroleum Hub, but we need to fix TOR first. And how do we do that? We make sure we fix it. We address the issue of the investment and what is needed in, and make sure that the workers are part of it, because we believe that we can make TOR profitable and make sure we protect jobs, working with all of you together.
Thank you. First of all, in the issue of consultation, we're talking about two manifestos. One manifesto is the People's Manifesto. That is it. It's a manifesto which is born out of consultation with people like you. And so if the manifesto itself is born out of deep consultation, then the implementation of that manifesto would certainly follow that suit. And so you will have no qualms, you will have no doubt at all that the NDC, we have proven to always work with you. And some of your colleagues stated that they were part of a lot of the processes that we went through in coming to this level. And I do recall that even ESLA, Honorable Tekwe, had to do extensive consultation in order to take us to that route. And now we're talking of ECG. We have stated clearly that the losses are increasing. We were able to register and post some profits. Today, the losses are going so high because, one, there's a misalignment in terms of the tariff structure itself. If you look at the cost of power and what we are actually collecting, and if you look at the ADB document, there's a chart that tells you our collection. It's about 86%. What it means is that if you buy something for 100 cedi and you go to sell it, you come home with 86 cedi. So there's already a loss. And also government interference. The PURC is not doing its job independently. And let us be honest, we would reform the PURC and ensure that you can sit in your office and based on the indicators, project that the cost of electricity ought to be X, Y, or Z. It doesn't have to be an opaque system. And I'm promising you, we will do that. When it comes to the PSP, we went through a very transparent process. Just when we left office, the MPP took it and turned it around and mismanaged it. So the two of us are not the same. We initiated this PSP process through a very, very competitive and transparent process. If the NDC was in office, let me assure you, ladies and gentlemen, this scandal of PDS will not happen. It will not under President Mahama. He would not take state assets and hand it over to family and friends. That will not happen. And so we are two different people. We cannot be the same. Finally, Honorable Boa touched on TOR. I hold a view, and most of us hold a view, that we can restructure TOR. It's a difficult process. We are aware of that. And that's why we instituted and constituted the Ghana Infrastructure Fund. The essence was that we'll take some of our oil revenues, put it in that fund. And those of you who would read the PIAC report, for 3 continuous years, almost 2 billion cedis cannot be accounted for. I just read the latest PIAC report. About 1.something billion cannot be accounted for. This year alone, we got almost $1 billion. We spent just half of the amount that went into ABFA. The other half cannot be accounted for. And so give the money to give. Let give look for a strategic partner. And let's restructure TOR. Because in refinery economics, TOR meets most of the criteria. One key issue has to do with economies of scale. I hold a view that TOR should be able to process between 100 to 200,000 barrels of crude oil per day. And continuously, the breakdowns is also a problem. So sometimes people talk about the workers. Yes, you can look at the workers and trim down. But even if you have very limited workers and the refinery keeps breaking down, you have a major problem. We attempted something by bringing 2 million barrels from 10 for TOR. That was a bold decision. And that is leadership. You must take bold decisions. We would attempt that again when we come into office, so that we refine our own crude oil here in Ghana. We would not continue to export crude oil. We can process it here, and you, the BDCs, can then procure that refined product and sell and even export. So take it from me, it's a challenge, but we are ready. We will take on that challenge. We would ensure that we deal with the fundamentals, and I tell you that TOR can be a shining star. Thank you very much.
We'll call on COPEC, but a little comment. Mr. Minister, when people are kind enough to carry $3 billion of your weight for 10 years, there are people you should appreciate in life. They are not people you should actually think of as people with a gun to your head. No, I'm just saying. Just by way of note, it has never been the case that BDCs have held a gun to any government's head. Thankfully, one of the people who made BDCs formidable is CTE, Mr. Alex Mould, and built the finance structure that sustained BDCs. If there's anybody who understood it perfectly, I think he's here and he can speak honestly about it. But it's not been the case. That fear of yours has cost this country 624 million. We advise that, should you ever have power again, be guided about what kind of fears you carry. Fears that can cost 624 million is fears that comes at the expense of people's health, people's education, and the growth of an economy. I must, however, admit, your intervention made and led actively by yourself and Honorable Tekwe on dealing with this deregulation was a very bold decision, and you must definitely be commended for it any day. It wasn't a popular one even within your government, but with the support of Honorable Tekwe yourself, we're able to get ourselves through this. So sustainability, let's look at practical solutions. On top, I do not think that you've really preferred a clear solution. So I'll table a solution for you as a policy alternative for your consideration. The problem that we have with TOR is not about investments. There's been millions of investments that have been sunk in TOR and they've yielded nothing. Refinery business is not about sparking machines and getting things going. It's trying to get this done sustainably, profitably. And you need a certain different kind of orientation that does not exist at all. The problem TOR has is nothing but politicians. Political interference in the activities of commercial activities and engineers is not a sustainable proposition. So we really need to see exactly what you intend to do. Are you looking at a commercial, a strategic partner with some partial privatization of TOR or not? Or you are looking at us still keeping the status quo and pumping a lot more money into TOR and coming up with the same results like we've seen in time past? That is the clarity, I think, from a policy perspective, the market will want to have. But you are right, we can't continue exporting crude and importing white products. BDCs will support that any day. By buying directly from TOR. It's a better option any day. But let's fix and take the right decisions and not the rhetoric. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Senor, and good evening. For us at the Petroleum Consumers Chamber, one thing is very important to us: petroleum security, availability. And then again, you are also looking at affordability. How much are you selling fuel to all of us? I remember in December, was it 22nd December, when ESLA was taken to Parliament, 23rd it was passed, 2nd January it had almost come into effect. What we saw was 27% increases cumulatively on our fuel prices. I must say that at the time, your good self and the Honorable Setekpe were probably the people I hated the most, and I'm sure most Ghanaians did hate all of you for that, because paying more for fuel is not something most of us are, never ready to. More so talk of a quantum jump of 27%. From hindsight, today, ESLA probably has served a very good purpose, and I'm glad the Honorable Setekpe is here. We knew you had a sunset clause on ESLA, and it was not supposed to be a debt that Ghanaians were to pay in perpetuity. I haven't seen anywhere in the world where, as you draw down on your debt, the debt rather increases, and then there's much more to be paid. And so if we were told that ESLA was now coming to be a permanent fixture in our petroleum pricing build, I'm quite sure that we would have been on the streets in perpetuity as well. But from hindsight, it served a good purpose. But then again, would your next administration be interested in any way whatsoever looking at retiring ESLA? Because I haven't seen anywhere in the world where debts are paid in perpetuity and forever. TOR debt introduced in 2003, 17 years after, we are still paying. I may hold a different perspective from my brother with ASAP. We believe that TOR is a very viable national asset that needs complete restructuring. And once TOR works, your petroleum security is somehow guaranteed, because you cannot always, like Senor had indicated earlier, if anything happens with your CBM and ABM and all of that, and you can't bring in products, and your refinery is also on its knees, then that could be quite dire. So we will be quite happy to hear, like Senor had indicated, practical steps that will be taken in the next administration of your political party in ensuring that the teething problems with TOR, scrapping TOR will be a cheaper option. In fact, it will be a lazier option, if you ask me. I do think that they have a lot of technical hands in there that could be up to the challenge. But then again, if you don't do what the private businesses will do, where their input cost and output is measured, and it's just anything goes. The politician brings 200 people, they are employed. A job that could be done by 40, you have 400 people on a schedule. If you do not look at these solutions and say with a political will that enough is enough, we are going to give toll on a performance contract to whichever management. Government will not go there and take free fuel, would not go into, whatever their numbers are. We would give them whatever resources that is needed from the beginning to ensure that it stays. Because others are building new refineries. If they were that bad, I do not think that Dangote would want to invest billions of dollars in a new refinery. Refineries are profitable, they are good, they give you the petroleum security that countries aspire to. And so we do think that you need to fix toll. How you fix that is what I'm sure the evening is for all of us. Please do not tell us about scrapping, because if you say that to us, then you are telling us whatever the country has achieved from the early 60s when we put together the refinery, probably it was needless altogether, and we want to hear a bit more about fixing toll. I would say this also bearing in mind the Petroleum Hub Agreement. We've had figures in excess of 60 billion to fix a petroleum hub program. And one would ask, does your market really have that kind of a muscle to take in an investment of 60 billion? When you cannot fix probably a 1 billion refinery and ensure that your Oklahoma storage look-alike in Boston is functioning as effective as you would want to, then you are talking of a $60 billion. The Ghanaian economy, I'm not sure, is up to that. So what do you propose going forward with the Petroleum Hub Agreement? If you should win power tomorrow, are we still going to go back to the same $60 billion discussion, which we believe clearly no investor will want to come and put his money into this, because your economy itself cannot give them back those returns? And the sub-regional market may not also be readily available. Senor, my last one. We're hoping to hear a bit about Ghana Cylinder Manufacturing Company. It is really bleeding as we speak. We haven't heard anything. We didn't see much in the manifesto. And then the Ghana Gas at Atwabo. Senor, in a minute I'll wrap up. Ghana Gas. We had issue earlier in the year about the kind of gas that is coming from Ghana Gas onto the local markets. I'm talking of the domestic gas. We raised issues initially, were rubbished, but in truth, the propane content is quite high if you compare to what other places are using. When we pushed, we got a response with the management to say that a deep propanizer is going to be installed to bring down the propane content, and we were told another 5 years. And so when we hear of explosions at the outlets, we complain, but there's a lot of domestic explosions also ongoing, which endangers Ghanaian consumers. Do you have any plans to ensure that within the shortest possible time a depropanizer is fixed whilst expanding Atwabu to ensure that the gas that you probably put in there can also come to the Eastern Enclave? Thank you very much.
I think that we've been quite clear on the issue of toll, that as a party, we believe that toll can be revamped. Honorable Boy talked about it. I also stated that we would prefer, because we've experimented that. We've done the Atwabu gas processing plant. With the Ghana Infrastructure Fund, we've been able to do the Ghana Airport. We've done some big ticket items. And so if you can resource the Ghana Infrastructure Fund, that means that you also have some funding base. Then when you are talking to a strategic partner, you can then negotiate with some strength. And so we are clear that we need a strategic partner to partner us. Toll in terms of location, and if you look refinery economics, is well located. For Ghana, we can serve the rest of the sub-region. We are near a deep port. We have very good technical skills there. But like I said, efficiency is the key thing, because refineries are generally price takers. The price is determined in terms of crude price. And when you are selling, MPA determines the price. So the key issue is the efficiency. And that efficiency comes with some of the things I mentioned in terms of economies of scale, refining complexity and how it stays on. So these are issues that we'll deal with. But I'm happy Ben talked about engagement. Honorable Bua alone cannot be an oasis of knowledge. Let us open up and let us engage. And let us build a country that all of us can be proud of. The first thing is the commitment. And once the commitment is there, and we do it in a transparent manner, I am confident that we'll get somewhere. ESLA and its long-term issues. You always hear that 6 billion has been paid. It's refinancing. If I owe Honorable Tekwe 6 billion, and I go to borrow 6 billion from Senior to pay Honorable Tekwe, I've paid Honorable Tekwe, but I'm still indebted. And let's face it. So if you establish an ESLA PLC and call it an SPV, and they go to convert it into bonds, and all they do is just paying the interest component. Like you are saying, some of them will mature in 5 years. And I've looked at the debt service account. I've looked at the sinking fund today. There's virtually nothing there. So what will happen is that they would have to roll over. And out of the 9.2 billion, they've been able to do only 6 billion. The 4.2 or 4 billion is sitting. And it's also generating interest and compounding. And so when you do the computation, we are in a serious problem. And so let's stop deceiving ourselves and face reality. When Honorable Tekwe came with the issue of ESLA, he had a roadmap. There was sunset issues so that eventually we can retire that. At least the energy debt service component of it would be catered for and it will go. But as it stands, it's rather compounding. When you read the 2019 report, we are incurring fresh debt. So we are not just dealing with existing debt or what you call legacy debt, but we are now adding more debt to it. When you put everything together, we are hitting almost 20 billion. That is not sustainable. So let's stop deceiving ourselves, be honest with the people of Ghana, face the truth, and do what is right and proper. Sometimes some of the decisions we take may not be popular, but it will be in the overall interest of this country. And when we do that, at least, it's better than trying to be populist. I've heard a lot of arguments about BDCs and all that. Yes, we are government. We don't do accounting profit. We do economic issues. So sometimes you might be angry with us, but we look at the long term and the overall interest of the country. But like I've said, President Mahama, we all know, is a man who believes in engagement. He's a man who wouldn't say that, I know it all. We would keep engaging with you. I'm sure that in our next administration, we will have similar fora with you where we can engage, listening to you, the industry players, listening to you, civil society organization. We would not rubbish you. We would take your comments where it will help collectively. We shall build a system. The issue of LPG. Yes, I think propane is more flammable because it's methane, ethane, propane, butane, in that order. So propane is certainly more flammable than butane. But I don't want to get into too many dynamics. We have a standards authority. Let's empower them so that they set the standards. Once the standards are set, then you ensure that you meet those standards. So let's have a Ghana standards, let's maintain it. If it means that getting all the equipment to meet those standards, we will do that. But I'm proud of Ghana Gas. I think that it's a very good investment and we can do a lot more with that.
My name is Adiubo Alfred and I'm here for the AOMC, the Association of Oil Marketing Companies. Basically, our main concern is about the taxes. Currently, OMCs, LPGMCs mostly contribute about 500 million in taxes every single month. And per the current way of paying, we have to pay these taxes after 21 plus 4 days, after every lifting window. Now, due to the competition and all that, many OMCs are not able to sell off all the products that they pick from the various BDCs. Yet, after 21 plus 4 days, if you're not able to pay all the taxes on the liftings you took, you are penalized. There's interest accruing, and this is becoming a huge challenge for all of us because it means that the OMCs would have to now go back to the banks, borrow money, come and pay these taxes and the interests bearing in mind that they also now owe the banks also. And so this is actually not helping them so much, and it's creating a lot of issues for us. Also, what's your plan on helping indigenous OMCs become multinationals? Because for a long time, we've seen a lot of them. Currently, there are over 110 OMCs, yet none of them have gone on to become multinationals. What is the plan of the NDC, should you get power, to help migrate, more like create some sort of congenial environment to help some of these guys become multinational? So basically, eyes on the taxes, how is the NDC going to help OMCs in terms of payment of taxes and then having all these interests and all that? Because we are rooting for a pay-as-you-sell model where there's more like a mechanism by which we can actually see exactly how much you have sold from what you picked up, just so that you are able to pay the taxes on the volumes that you actually picked, and then have sold, not what you have picked during that period. Exactly. So basically, that's our question for you. How are you going to help us to pay our taxes without having all these interest charges and penalties as we go along the way? Thank you.
There are a couple of questions, but I'll take just one or two for purpose because of time. The PRMA, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, was enacted under your regime, and you did indicate that here. When you look at Section 21 of that particular law, it talks about how to utilize the annual budget funding amount, and it speaks to the issue of a national development plan. Now, you have had the opportunity of being in power, and we haven't heard much about the national development plan issue. And we now also have your manifesto for the next, assuming you are given power, what next you would do. We would like to know what your plans are for a law that you have yourself enacted. What are your plans in terms of national development plan, especially for the energy sector? Generally, national development plan itself is envisaged in the Constitution of Ghana. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a National Development Plan Commission. So to the extent that there is a constitutional, the Constitution envisages this, and the fact that there is a statute that refers to this, that for purposes of spending the annual budget funding amount, you should do so, in accordance with a medium-term expenditure framework that aligns with a national development plan. Is it the position of the NDC that going forward, you prefer sticking to a medium-term development framework rather than canvassing a national development plan? That would be one. And then the last one is, mostly when money is allocated to the various sectors of the economy, it so happens, and consistently PIAC has found out, that either some of these monies are not spent at all. You allocate money for a particular purpose and you don't spend it at all. And we really want to know what are the challenges, or what is it that is challenging to government in terms of spending these monies, and yet we come out saying that we don't have money to do A, B, C, D, when in fact money has been allocated for this purpose. And where does the money go at the end of the day when you don't spend it? Thank you.
So the NDC is nominating Honorable Setekpe to respond to this set of questions. Let's give him a round of applause. We are still live on CTFM 97.3, relevant radio always.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Let me, my good friend, Senior Jose, there was no hostility towards BDCs. and I know that we had our arguments. But it was a question of a strategic stock approach versus continuing to pay subsidies. And the monies that were given from the initial ESLA flows to TOR went to support a strategic stock, a strategic storage approach, which the United States, South Africa, and many countries, even you will recall that when the strength of Saudi Arabia lies in the strategic stocks that they hold. Given the oscillation in prices, which can rocket to $100 per barrel, which was the issue of VRA, and then come down to $25, $35. Many countries intervene to stabilize the price between a floor and a ceiling. And that is what we were attempting to do. You recall that the conversation, veered, to the point where we were inviting the BDCs, yes, to be partners because if you want to hold strategic stocks, you also need tanks, fuel tanks, so that infrastructure fund was going to come in to promote that activity, which would also help the landlocked countries and the value chain, so that it will serve a West African purpose. And so simply that was, the strategy. It yielded some results. What many people saw as using Goya, to disrupt the price was one of actually a strategic intervention. And it was that which actually led to, I think we all forget about the Petroleum, which was stopped, I remember very well, around about June 2015. And to date, we've not had, combined with the liberalization. So you actually had to have some strategies that had worked, in other countries. So that is, and I think that this is something that can be refined. In terms of, and this is part of the consultation, yes, things were tense at the time, but it didn't mean that the consultation. I like to remind my good friends from ASEP that the PRMA itself took 1.5 years of consultation around the country to formulate, including led by my good friend Dr. Makotufo, who today is very active, in the management of the economy. And so we are not a government that, moves away. And as was said, the ESLA also involve consultation, and there will be consultation on the energy sector. You'll recall that such consultation actually brought together. In fact, it was an integrated strategy for the energy sector. And then when I put on the power hat as a supervisor, not, minister, I got much insight. I think ASEP and others were brought to the, to the table for some of the discussions, not all of them. You recall that it was integrated. We have the partial risk guarantee from the World Bank, which was to enable, the ENI, the gas itself, to come out. Then we had the MCC, which was actually part of Partnership for Growth, with the United States. And just as we were leaving office, we had to bring the World Bank and the MCC together in that integrated strategy to make sure that, and that's where the PSP, which was also, downstream, came into. So there was a strategy. And in fact, with respect to the ESLA that was brought in, yes, there was a sunset clause. It was not explicit. I think this is one of the issues which we had advised. We had from ASEP at the time to make explicit. The reason we didn't make it explicit was we didn't know the power of the flows. But by the time we knew the power of the flows, if you want to know the intention, you will see that the VRA debt restructuring was 3 to 5 years. That was how powerful we felt ESLA was going to be. And so the term was 3 to 5 years. It has since been refinanced and extended, as has been said by my, colleague. And we left, and the second term sheet, there was a second term sheet of $600 million, which was to settle the debt of the IPPs, which is why we reject, the argument. that we left all those. It was to settle the debt of the IPP, $600 million US, which was led by Afrism, and it was to refinance, just like VRA, the debt that was owed to the banks. So the banks would come in, as the 13 local banks did, this time including foreign banks, to take off that. It was acknowledged that the total debt was 2.2 billion. Today, it is estimated, and it's in the ESLA report, and I'm quoting in the 2019. If you look at the table, ESLA is projected to bring in 41 billion Ghana cedis by 2025. It was actually, I don't know, about 20-something billion before, lower figure, before the ESLA levy was increased. So how can you not liquidate, including the enhanced road levy, which is debt owed to contractors? How can you not liquidate debt to the energy sector, the banking sector, bailout costs, which are, you can estimate, or it's estimated to be about 30 billion if you like, plus that is the energy sector plus the, out of 41 billion. How can you not, do a plan of refinancing with 250 million injection, Ghana cedis only from the first one? We were able to refinance 2.2 billion of the VRA debt, the entire debt. And a missing link, if I may, and I'm conscious of the time, because of the integrated nature of it, the settlement of the VRA debt and the debts that we were talking about were not going to be free, because they were being paid by the, energy SOEs already. And my good friend here, we had various discussions on this, thanks to the chief director, who led some of the two chief directors. And the strategy was that if, for example, VRA was settling the debt, some of which was Forex, that portion, which had been taken by ESLA, would be swapped and would have been what would support the LC, supporting the gas, because it's a substitution of debt. And so we had all these strategies. So the fact that they were set aside, does not mean that, and the debt has ballooned to the point where the ESLA revenue, such powerful, and it still remains powerful, and now has been extended beyond the 3 to 5 years, including the second term sheet, to 17 and 20 years or whatever, which is basically refinancing that is taking place, and for which reason it was taken off government balance sheet on VRA balance sheet, but today has become part of, and it's likely to increase, public debt, because ESLA is not seen as the ring fence, revenue that was to take off the energy sector, debt. Much of the answers to some of the questions that have been raised are fiscal, and we don't have time. There was no featuring of how, the petroleum revenue itself was structured to be used through management of debt, the sinking fund. We did refinancing, but it wasn't entirely refinancing. And I refer you to the debt report. You will see that the rate at which we were borrowing was going down and reversed when we stopped using the sinking fund to pay down debt. We had used 500 million US dollars of our own oil revenues to take off the 500 out of 750 of the first sovereign bond, the Kufuor bond. We had actually paid 332.6 million US dollars. There was a balance of 200 million, which actually was used by the current government October 4th, the 10th anniversary or the maturity date of the bond, to pay off the balance, amounting to 500. It is that which has stopped. Now the issue with ABFA is that much of the revenue was going into, in fact, no investments actually. The ABFA had become synonymous with the capital budget. Why? Because of the issue of single spine and others, which was becoming an issue. Now, as a result of which, we had the ABFA going into small projects. And so the lag, what I call the lag, which is often interpreted as, devoting the ABFA to a project and you don't see it, it's because of the lack in the flows and the completion of the projects as happened with capital budgets. In order to make ABFA visible, that is the story of the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. So that was going to use the oil revenues to leverage the markets, to borrow. The seed money was the first bond. Was on the first bond. 25% of ABFA was going to go into the infrastructure fund. And the increase from 15% to 17.5% of the VAT was also to go into the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. Again, giving the power of flows together, of those flows, together with the flows from the airport tax. That's how come GIF became one of the institutions that finance, the Terminal 3, airport. And it was going to do the Airport City 2 on its balance sheet. And this is the self-financing. So I don't think we should see development as a question you mentioned, only in terms of the projects. But the power to finance the projects is what matters. And you will see from Dubai to Singapore to many countries, and even Saudi Arabia. You recall that much of the flotation that was done for Saudi Aramco actually went into setting up, a sovereign wealth fund and a fund to leverage the markets to do more development. And the same thing with Norway, those who advise us, So it is a wherewithal. So if you have the plan referred to was the National Development Plan under the Constitution. And so for me, the most important thing is how do you move away from using sovereign guarantee, for every project. And that is how the self-financing model using. And in fact, we have started discussions, alongside commodity bonds with GMPC to use the GMPC funds, if possible, which is for the portion that's for infrastructure development, together with, the funds of the infrastructure fund, so that we could go into the market with force, and it yielded results because actually by the time the first sovereign bond was being had come to maturity, the yield was 4.5%, which is why the 200 million was not, traded. So this is just so much of it lies in the fiscal, area, which we can have a discussion. We are available to have a discussion with PIAC. So I want to thank you for this opportunity, to explain some of the issues that have come up.
Thank you, Honorable Setekwe. So we'll have the Independent Power Producers, Chamber of Independent Power Producers. But before then, there's an online question on power. It says, hi, we have a question on the power side. Last year, August, the government announced they will renegotiate contracts with IPPs to move from take or pay to take and pay, removing revenue security, the revenue security aspect on power generators. What is NDC's views on take and pay versus take or pay contracts, and if they think the change will affect new power projects and thus likelihood of job creation? At this juncture, I'll give the floor to Mr. Luklima Patobo, CEO of the Independent Power Producers Chamber. And you take the first question and his questions all in one.
Thank you very much. My question is similar to what you have. I was going to say the current government has repeatedly faulted your government for signing what they call extortionist take or pay PPAs. To the extent that, included, yes, to the extent that it has resulted in government unavoidably spending about $500 million annually. And by way of perceived solution, they think renegotiating this extortionist PPA will bring solution. I would like you to justify the signed extortionist take or pay PPAs. Also, assuming Ghanaians vote for you, will you also pursue renegotiating the signed PPAs? Thank you.
Let me just show some slide if I don't know if they can do that. I think that beyond the politics, the facts themselves would tell you. This is the document I was referring to. So this is a document, and then let's go. Next, let's see. This total distribution. Let's go to the next one. And this average end user tariff, as you can see, Nigeria, Guinea, Burkina, Ghana. This is an official document. And so when somebody says that Ghana has the highest end user tariff in the sub-region, it cannot be true. This is a real job they've done. And if you go up, the next one, this is estimate of household income spent on electricity. So you can see all the countries. And yet people say, oh, Ghana, all our money, you use it to pay electricity. Yes, electricity might appear expensive, but facts are facts. You cannot have different sets of facts. And the PPAs, let's go, I'll just show something from ECG. Let's go. The next one, if it's possible. I just wanted to show you some figures from ECG. Okay, these are like collections. So Ghana's collection is just about median, so that's 86.8%. You see, Niger is doing 98, Mali is doing, so even that alone is problematic. And then let's go to the next one. These are corporate statistics from ECG. So if you look at 2016, they made a profit of 583. 2017, a loss of 642. 2018, a loss of 2.5 billion. 2019, a loss of 4.4 billion. And so you are seeing that the exponential is very, very high. What you call capacity charge is what they say is take or pay. So a developer is not a financier or a financing institution. A developer only comes with a concept. That developer has to go to a financing institution to look for money. No bank, no financial institution would give a developer money and say that buy this plant, come and put it in Ghana, as and when they want it, then you sell and pay. Then how do you even do the cash flows? You must give them the cash flows to show that I can pay. And so when I hear we will do take and pay, I ask them, when you were in power and you were signing those PPAs, why didn't you sign take and pay? Capacity charges are capital recovery charges that you need to get to pay. And that is factored in the tariff structure. So if PURC was allowed to do its work, how come we didn't have that problem under Honorable Tekwe? How come all the IPPs were not threatening to shut down the plants in 2016? Ameri was available, Kappa was available, AXA had come online. How did we manage to pay them? Why is it that today we cannot pay them? You can't eat your cake and have it. So let me assure you, by God's grace, when we assume office, and not if, because I know by God's grace, the people of Ghana would restore the NDC. On 7th of January, we will be transparent with you, the people of Ghana. We would ensure that if it means that taking out some taxes and lowering the cost of energy, we do that. But we wouldn't pretend to be subsidizing. And yet, we cannot pay for that. I also want to put on record that it is completely untrue that this government pays $500 million for capacity or excess capacity annually. Even ECG, and ECG is the only off-taker when it comes to these IPPs. You can bear with me. NEDCO is not. And there are ECG figures. If you go again, I'll show you. The figure of 270 million ECG gives includes the 25% reserve margin. I think the next slide will give it to you. The 25% reserve margin, it is embedded in that 278. When you discount that 25% reserve margin, I'm telling you this so-called excess capacity is mute. At the finance committee, we asked for the details of that 5-point-something billion payments. It turned out that Stratcon, Letasco, and all those fuel suppliers were being paid. You don't pay capacity charges when you consume the power. And you don't consume fuel if you are not consuming the power. Fuel is a pass-through. It's a variable product. So why do you pay fuel about 1 billion and then turn around and say that it's capacity charge? That's alien in that sector. It cannot be true. Please, facts are facts. And if you have some knowledge in that sector, you cannot make that kind of assertion. You lump MMDAs, they are not able to pay. You lump all their payments, you pay, and then say that it's capacity charge. That is not capacity charge. Capacity charge is a fixed component that you need And it's a capital recovery issue. So please, let me assure you, the IPPs, we would work together. I know going forward that some of the plans will have to come down. T1 is getting old. T2 is getting old. We'll have to phase them out. And so very soon, if we keep saying that we have so much capacity, we might have a problem. If Gridco is able to finish that line and export some power, by and large is going down. If we increase our consumption through industrialization, especially with our program for Valco, if you're able to bring Valco and the aluminum industry full scale, then it means that we are really going to be consuming some power. So take it from me, we would ensure that we do the right thing. I don't think there's any other issue again. Okay. Thank you.
So the OMCs have indicated you didn't answer their question on their taxes about the 21 and 4 days. So, Honorable Tekwe, you may. So we'll just wrap up this session. But just a little comment on what your presentation, Honorable Jinapo. Shouldn't our benchmark be what tariffs are sustainable for the level of industrialization we require, other than just benchmarking tariffs in other countries? You mentioned Valco. And I'm quite concerned about the view that the tariffs we have today are sustainable for Valco. Absolutely not. There's no tariff, maybe except for VRA, that can sustain Valco. I'm also a member of the current Ministerial Advisory Board, and I reviewed their presentation just like I did in your time. And the power tariffs they require are nothing near what today you can actually deliver. So having capacity is one. How commercially sustainable or viable is that cost is another. And that, I think, should be a conversation that should be the focus, other than just looking at whether we have Burkina Faso. These are not benchmarks for our industrialization as a country. So do we have tariffs that can actually sustain industry? I've invested in a factory, and the tariffs I see today make it quite difficult for us to be competitive. So shouldn't we rather be looking at what the economic policy position as a government you have with industrialization, with power utilization, other than just tariffs comparing to other people? All right. But we need an answer for the Association of Oil Marketing Companies, and then we'll wrap it up.
I think that we do discussions contextually. If a minister comes to say that Ghana has the highest tariff in the sub-region, the question is whether it's true or not. That ought to be settled. And when I have this opportunity, it's only proper that I settle that once and for all. Issue of cost of electricity is an issue of relativity. What you describe as expensive, one might describe that as inexpensive. And like we are saying, once you are moving from LCO to domestic gas, and you are making a net saving of about $350 million, you can then pass that cost on to consumers. If you are making losses of 86, you collect just 86, and you are making loss of 24%, that cost will be passed on. Because the IPP, you can't go and tell him that because I made a loss, I wouldn't pay you. So it's an issue of efficiency as well. As you get more efficient, then you can pass the benefit to the consumer. So I agree with you that we ought to have realistic, affordable tariffs, especially for industry. I hold the view that Valco can run if we dedicate some hydro to Valco. It's about a mix. We've done all the numbers. We've cranked the numbers. We've looked at them. And I'm telling you that the Valco today, as it stands, if you dedicate hydro to Valco, it will be competitive. Ameri would very soon become our plant. That means I would have paid off the amount. It becomes a legacy item. You can then deal with some of these issues. So there are issues that we can deal with. We can't settle everything at a policy forum and go into the nitty-gritties. But I just thought that at a high level, I should deal with some of the issues. When we get into the nitty-gritties, we would crank the figures with people like you, and we'll make a very good decision at the end of the day. Thank you very much.
Yeah, let me tackle this question from two perspectives. First of all, petroleum, like alcohol, and some other products, happen to be the ones that are subject to excise taxes on environmental and other grounds. And so I think that for the stability of the tax regime, this is the role that these taxes, we often call them the sin taxes or environmental taxes, play, and they are very much part of the. But because of the nature of crisis that countries go through, Since the Rawlings administration, we have come to use some of these taxes as counter-cyclical measures, for managing the economy. And those are the taxes we call temporary taxes. So they are basically, there are about three, but the two which are used regularly are import tariffs. Then you have sometimes the environmental taxes, which was used for ESLA, and I'll come to that. And then usually the sectors of companies that even in a crisis tend to make some profits. A good example would be because of the shift to data. That is as a result of the lockdown. Even though in a crisis, you can agree with me that the communication sector, is often cited as one among those which have. So you tend to put a temporary tax, to counter because revenues are going down. So for the sectors that are doing well, you put the temporary taxes. The phenomenon is that these taxes are removed, often within 2 years. So the Rawlings administration, they are actually called stabilization taxes or, temporary taxes or whatever. So it started with the structural adjustment program era, went through he started the Kufuor era, the MERS era. And then, because of the fall in crude oil prices, we started taking off the temporary taxes with a view to Tenfield and Sankofa coming to strengthen, the tax regime, and then they would have been off. Those taxes still remain. Despite they remain, the temporary taxes, they remain. And so part of the problem was that because we didn't take them off when the times were good, when the times became rough, it became difficult to take them off. Right? And so they remain on the. Now, when we were faced with, the issue of the energy sector, the disruption in gas supply, DUMSO, and all that, ESLA came in, and I already said that it was supposed to be 3 to 5 years, and that's where much of the burden went to the energy sector. You are talking about the 25% increase was on a low because crude oil prices had fallen. Because remember, that was the problem that the economy itself was facing at the time between late 2014 to 2016. Crude oil prices had fallen. We had used $99 per barrel to prepare the budget, and it fell to initially, I think, $32 or $35. Then they never crossed $45 on average for 2015 and 2016. Right. So they were ad valorem. And so as the prices went down, they were to go up. But then the ceiling was fixed. Again, those taxes remain. So if the ESLA, and mind you, the ESLA flows for the first refinancing were based on only Jubilee. So even that's why we said 3 to 5 years with the power of Sankofa and Tenfield. It was possible that it would have gone off in 3 years. And if you look at if it had been managed the way it was envisaged, it would have gone off by now. And that would have alleviated some of the problems that we were talking, the special, import tax.
He's talking about the 21 days given the downstream.
I'm coming to that. Yes, because, okay, 2 minutes, yes. Because you met 1 minute, okay. So you mentioned the first part. That one is a financial. Taxes are paid on accrual basis. Once the product is sold, you can, and it said that you can give credit for everything but not the tax. And I think if it is a question of the timing, yes, we will look at it, because it's usually 1 month, it's 21 days, and those are things which are done in consultation with GRA. But there is a fundamental principle, and I think this is what I always tell business, that once you sell the tax force due, it's the same thing with VAT, it's the same thing with even corporate income tax you can be owing. So that is something which we take note, and in consultation with GRA and look at whether, it is unique from the other taxes and see what can be done about it.
And also in consultation, I believe, with the OMCs themselves. Very well, thank you. Note that, so add it to your quote. All right, we are taking quick comments from Facebook, and then we're wrapping up with a wrap-up comment from the NDC. We have from Mr. Peter Echibosiaku. The NDC promised to double the capacity of TOR. They rather left TOR almost at the verge of collapse. TOR remains in a state of comatosis. It's a promise every government makes, and they all successfully fail at it. What's the way forward with ECG? In the event that the NDC wins the December election, this comes from Christian Alija. And the third one, tell them we don't need their comparative assessment with other countries. We want our own benchmarks. And Derek Tete, I think that's been responded to by Honorable Jinapo. And there's one last comment from our team's network. How does the NDC, this is from Christian Pesese, how does the NDC People's Manifesto address the governance challenges affecting most state-run energy related institutions, especially GMPC, TOR, and BOST? The president is responsible for the appointment of the CEOs. The recent Petroleum Hub Development Corporation that will be established as a result of the new law does not solve the governance problems. Will the incoming NDC government do anything different to change the status quo? I think it's a simple problem. We have the party politicians fully dominating most of our institutions. That leads to policy inconsistency, regulatory inconsistency, and also arbitrariness. How do we ensure stability? By insulating industry from the political maneuverings with every political change. You know, we keep losing great people every now and then. We have a very great MPA CEO today. We had a great one also who preceded him. But sometimes we need some consistency going forward. How do you intend to deal with that? So, Mr. Honorable Boy, I think you're wrapping up for the NDC team. While you give us your last wrap-up comment, we'll be grateful if you could respond to these things. ECG and the issue of governance and sustainability in there.
Thank you very much. Let me thank the CEO, Mr. Hosea, and the Ghana Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors for this opportunity. I think that, as has been stated, our record with the distribution sector, the performance of ECG is very clear. ECG recorded clear profits. ECG is on its knees now. We have the experience, we have the capacity, and we intend to basically revamp and make sure the ECG is stronger. And that is exactly what we started the partnership with Compact 2 in the first place. What is the story? That Compact collapsed, and $200 million that is supposed to be for Ghanaians was rolled back because of what you obviously already know. The NDC government, all the English we've talked about, and let me make it clear. What we have seen here is that it is only the NDC government that has a superior record. The reason why the lights are on today in Ghana is because the NDC brought 800 megawatts and stabilized generation, and we have the capacity to make sure that on an annual basis, the annual growth in generation capacity, we are not going to go to bed. We will make sure we monitor and match it on an annual basis. We are the ones that have the record to have addressed the fuel solution that has always been a problem. We brought Ghana to the gas era, and we've showed it. We intend to strengthen the gas sector. We intend to roll out our gas master plan, for the 40 years gas master plan, to make sure that we can move beyond power usage of gas and go use gas for industrialization and create jobs. It is the NDC that passed the Renewable Energy Act. It is the NDC that is going to move Ghana into a renewable energy era and make sure that we can empower even remotest of places in our country and make sure we achieve universal access to electricity. The leadership of President John Dramani Mahama that has been demonstrated here is if we are even ready and willing to engage and listen and ensure that the private sector is part of the governance that we want to bring. I want to thank all of you. Thank you very much.
On that note, On behalf of industry, I want to say a big thank you to the National Democratic Congress for making time to share their thoughts with us. I want to thank City FM, our media partners, 97.3 FM, Relevant Radio always, for such a yeoman's job. City FM is the way to go. Relevant Radio always. Thank you, everybody, and good night.